Welcome to the Long Beach Economic Partnership's Quarterly Economic Forum, Accelerate Long Beach Trade and Logistics. We gather now with new hope, with plans for a strong economic recovery in Long Beach, one that is actively undoing the inequities of the past. I'm excited by the tailwinds propelling our local economy. Thanks to a record-breaking year at our port, our innovative space and launch ecosystems, exciting possibilities are helping us reach for the stars. After a full year of pandemic adjustments and perseverance, we can finally see light at the end of the tunnel. We gather virtually today with hope that we will gather in person here at our world-class Long Beach Convention Center before the end of the year. Today, you will hear from my colleagues on the City Council and the Mayor himself about the city's strategy for a nation-leading, equitable economic recovery. We will learn from experts at Cal State Long Beach Center for Economic Research about national, regional, and global trends and what they mean for your business in the upcoming year. You will hear from top executives at the Port of Long Beach about its record-breaking year in 2020. And you'll also hear from harbor area companies as they keep up with the demand while operating the greenest port complex in America and keeping our workers safe. But before we get to all the good stuff, I want to say thank you. Not for just being here with us today, but for all you've done to keep our economy and our city moving forward through this challenging year. Thank you for all the ways that you've shown up, you've masked up, and you stayed home and you shopped local. In a year of so much turmoil, the many small actions and big sacrifices that and the partnership and all of today's sponsors, we look forward to working with you to accelerate Long Beach.
Good morning. I'm Stephanie Rivera, Community Engagement Editor at the Long Beach Post and your Master of Ceremonies for Accelerate Long Beach Trade and Logistics. Thanks for kickstarting today's event, Councilwoman Cindy Allen. Councilwoman Allen represents most of the port area, and she served as founding board member for the Long Beach Economic Partnership. Accelerate Long Beach is the Long Beach Economic Partnership's quarterly forum, where expert economists, local business leaders, and elected officials all share their insights into the state of the Long Beach economy and what you can expect in the near term. This is the kind of data and intel that you can use to make plans for the future. Today, you'll hear about the trade logistics industries in Long Beach and what they're planning after the port's record-breaking year, as well as how Long Beach city leaders plan to implement an equitable economic recovery that they hope will be a model for the nation. Today's program is brought to you free thanks to our sponsors, the Port of Long Beach, the City of Long Beach Economic Development Department, Downtown Long Beach Associates, Shoreline Village, KPFF, and Cal State Long Beach's Department of Economic Research. Thanks to the Long Beach Convention Center and Visitors Bureau, you're able to watch this content from wherever you are in the world today. If you signed in via the Hubalo event platform, you'll have the opportunity to interact with each other, connect with today's speakers, and ask questions during the event. Check it out.
Welcome to your virtual event platform, an interactive website where all the information you need to participate is located. To get started, you will need to log in and create your profile. When you are filling in the blanks with your name and other details, we strongly encourage you to upload your photo so attendees can quickly scan the thumbnails and reach out to contact you on a one-on-one basis to chat or set up a meeting. This feature is available from the time you register, so take advantage and start some of those conversations today, even before the event begins. In addition, use the Event Feed tab to share photos and comments with the entire group. This feature is also available from the moment you register and can help kickstart meaningful discussions and allows you to share stories and photos before, during, and even after the event. Then take a few minutes to explore all the tabs to learn more about the featured speakers, sponsors, and exhibitors. Using the embedded social media links, you can connect with them directly. During the live presentations, there are 3 features you can use to connect with fellow attendees and the speakers. Chat to share your thoughts with all the attendees, Q&A to ask questions of the speakers, and polls to answer questions posed by the speakers. Once a poll is closed, the results will be immediately tabulated and shared. Lastly, if you need anything, please click on the Help Desk tab, which will be staffed during the entire duration of your live event. Thank you and welcome.
We'll now hear from Dr. Robert Kleinhans, an adjunct professor of economics and the associate director of the Office of Economic Research at Cal State Long Beach, and the founder of Kleinhans Economics. Dr. Kleinhans brings over 30 years of experience to economic studies and policy analysis. A leading voice on the economy at the state, national, and local level, he is a frequent contributor to the media, appearing on CNBC, Bloomberg, NPR, and other news outlets in California and across the U.S. Kleinhans holds a PhD and MA in economics from USC and a BA in economics from the University of Michigan.
I didn't realize they were going to do the whole thing.
Remember, you can check out the bios for all of today's speakers on Hubelo and send them direct messages via the platform. Dr. Kleinhans will be answering your questions directly after his presentation, so be sure to type them in the Q&A tab. Welcome, Dr. Robert Kleinhans.
Hello, I'm here to talk about the U.S. and California economy as a part of the Quarterly Economic Forum. I'm pleased to bring you what I think is a good outlook for the U.S. and for California economy in the year 2021. So we'll look at what's happening now in the U.S. We'll also see how we expect to see that California will be accelerating as we go through this year. We'll also examine what's happening in housing with the K-shaped trajectory that we have seen and will continue to see in the different components of the housing market. So what's happening now here in the United States? Well, you know, it's been a year since the onset of the pandemic shutdown. And during that period of time, we saw that the unemployment rate for the U.S. just skyrocketed from what was a record low of 3.5% to just over 14%, basically a quadrupling of the unemployment rate in just 2 months' time. This was really unprecedented. And this was accompanied by a drop in employment of over 20 million, 22 million jobs were lost, again, just in the span of a couple of months as we saw non-farm employment fall from 152 million to 130 million jobs. So then we began a recovery in the ensuing months, and we've continued down that path since then. Of course, on the one hand, we want to resume economic activity. We want to get back to our restaurants and all those kinds of activities that we've been unable to take in over the last several months, but we have to bear in mind that we still need to contain the virus. But as we recover and as we move forward, we'll see many parts of the economy reopen and pick up steam. Some of the industries that you're looking at on the right-hand side of the screen will lag in recovery. Restaurants will take some time to come back, as will personal services and things like that. But the bottom line is that as we go through this year, we expect to see both jobs and economic activity pick up. If we take a look at gross domestic product, or GDP, it's worth noting that we were in the midst of a record-long expansion leading up to the pandemic shutdown. And so we were growing at somewhere just over 2% GDP growth up through 2019. But then last year we saw a 3.5% decline in GDP, which was unprecedented. At least we haven't seen anything that large in over 70 years. But on the right-hand side, you can see that all of that downturn was really front-loaded in the first half of the year as we saw GDP fall from over 19 trillion to $17 trillion. And in the quarters since, that's the second half of last year, we actually regained quite a bit of that economic activity, finishing the year at just under $19 trillion. So we still have a ways to go, but it's important to kind of see where we've been and where we're headed. So the worst decline in GDP since 1946, but we've already recovered a great deal of that in the second half of last year, and we expect here in the first quarter of this year to see somewhere in the neighborhood of 5 to 6% growth. We lost 22 million jobs, but we've already recovered over 12 million jobs up to this point. About 60% of the jobs lost have been recovered to date. And the unemployment rate surge has since receded, and so now we're looking at a national unemployment rate of just over 6%. If you've been paying attention to the news, you'll know that the Fed just announced yesterday that it anticipates the unemployment rate will fall to 4.5% by year end. Now, that's a pretty optimistic outlook, and that's coming from a conservative Federal Reserve Bank. So I'm hopeful that we'll realize that at year end. Meanwhile, what's supporting that recovery nationally and locally is the whole set of 3 relief packages that the Congress has passed and have gone into action over the last several months. So they equate to 30% of GDP. So that type of boost is all important to the kind of growth that we expect to see in 2021. So where is that growth going to come from? Well, one big source of growth is going to be the consumer sector. It accounts for 2/3 of the economy. And over the last several months, the consumer sector has been quite prudent with its use of credit. You can see that consumer loan balances have edged down. The consumer sector balance sheet is in good shape. Overall equity in home ownership and more generally wealth has been on the rise. So this positions the consumer sector well for growth. And as jobs recover and people get back to work, they're going to earn incomes. They're going to turn around and they're going to spend that. So all of that points to an improved consumer sector with increasing consumer spending over the coming months. And what that means too here in the Port of Long Beach is that we're going to see more scenes like this, pent-up demand that's going to translate into ships that are waiting to offload their goods that you and I are going to buy. Other sectors of the domestic economy have also turned around. The business sector pulled back sharply in the first half of last year, as you can see. But in the second half of last year, it's come on strong. We expect to see more of that here in 2021. Of course, we know about what's happening with the trade situation because we live here in Long Beach. But during the first part of last year, trade fell fairly sharply. But in the second half, and in the fourth quarter, exports were up 22% and imports were up 29%. This is for the nation as a whole in quarter-to-quarter annualized terms. So, and of course, you know that here at the Port of Long Beach, we had a record last year. We're on track for a very strong year for port activity as well. For the 2 ports, we had the second best year on record, which is remarkable considering the fact that we're working our way through the symptoms and the effects of the pandemic. And of course, with all those government stimulus packages and relief packages, the budget deficit has climbed. Even before the recession, the federal government was looking at a $1 trillion deficit. Last year, it had a $3 trillion deficit, in part because of the first relief package. And this year, we expect to see yet another deficit in the neighborhood of $3 trillion. But then in the out years, as we go forward through this decade, those deficits will fall to the $1 trillion range. Still high, but it's better than what we're experiencing right now. And inflation, there's a lot of concern right now about where inflation is headed. But quite frankly, the expectation is that inflation is very much going to be in check, somewhere in the low single digits, with an expectation of somewhere between 2 and 2.5% this year. So there's no sign of runaway inflation taking over the economy here in 2021. And that's good for interest rates. So interest rates are going to respond to a couple of things right now. And you can see on the right-hand side that the yield on the 10-year Treasury, which is shown in the middle of this panel, has already headed up. And the 30-year mortgage has also headed north. Both of these respond to 2 things at least, one of which is the expected rate of inflation. It's expected to be fairly low in the neighborhood of 2 to 2.5%, as I said. It also is the case that these rates respond to anticipated economic growth. So if we're expecting the economy to grow by 5 or 6% this year, which is much better than we did last year and even in the 2 or 3 previous years, that almost assuredly is going to show up in higher interest rates. So We expect interest rates to edge up this year, not going through the roof or anything like that, but they will respond to the improvement in the economy. So despite what we heard from the Fed yesterday, that it anticipates the unemployment rate will fall to 4.5% by the end of this year, it's just a good idea to take a look at the historic record for the economy as it recovers from economic downturns. Now, this is a pandemic shutdown, a one-time event, if you will, which is different from economic cycles that have their ups and downs that are the result of imbalances in the economy. But if we track this recovery along with those cycles that we've seen in the past, it could take several years before we get to 4% unemployment. I hope I'm wrong. I hope this graph is wrong. But the fact of the matter is that, for example, during the Great Recession, it took 6 years to recover all the jobs that were lost during that downturn. And even the job counts will take some time to recover. Keep in mind that so much of this recovery is going to be dictated by how you and I feel about the safety of moving about and resuming our economic activity. And so the sooner we find that the rollout of vaccines has been successful and that the counts for the disease have retreated ever more, I think the better we're all going to feel about getting out there and resuming our economic activity. So for the U.S., we expect this year to see some acceleration, especially in the second half. For all of this year, GDP could easily be up by 5 or 6%. We've already recovered more than half of the jobs that were lost last year, but we'll continue to see improvement on that front. It will be an uneven trajectory as, in fact, certain households and workers have already fully recovered. They've got their jobs back, their incomes are back, and yet other sectors of the economy will take some time to see recovery. And do keep in mind that interest rates signal that the economy is actually doing better at this point. So this is, in a way, this is a good sign. As for California, well, it's been very much like the U.S. The picture's been quite similar. The unemployment rate quadrupled in the early stages of last year from just over 4%, which was a record low, to 16% by April of last year. But it has since come down. It's at 9% as of the month of January. It's been harder hit than the U.S. as a whole, partly because of the mix of industries that we have, which tilts a little bit more toward some of these harder hit industries. And it also has reopened more slowly just because of the protocols that we followed in our reopening. So we lost 2.7 million jobs in the early part of 2020. We wiped out 15 years of job gains in just 2 months, which is just stunning. But we've since recovered just over 900,000 jobs, about 34% of the total. So not nearly as good as we saw for the U.S., which has recovered about 60%. We expect to close that gap as we go through this year. And the unemployment rate, as I say, is now at 9%, so about twice where it was just before the onset of the pandemic. Leisure and hospitality, which was the hardest hit sector of the economy, accounts for just 12% of employment, but it accounted for over a third of the job losses that we've experienced. On the flip side, on the other extreme, transportation and warehousing was the one industry in California that actually added jobs last year, up 3% compared to a year ago. So if we look around the state of California, we find a very mixed picture. Some parts of the state, especially the inland counties, are actually ahead of the curve in terms of recovering jobs. That's what you see here on the screen. LA County, though, is still recovering, or has only recovered about 26%, somewhere in the neighborhood of a quarter of the jobs that it lost during the shutdown last year. So we expect that to turn around, but do keep in mind that the LA County economy, again, tilts more heavily towards some of these sectors that have been the hardest hit. So as those sectors get back on track, we'll see that the overall economic picture is going to improve. You'll hear more about the LA County picture from Dr. Seiji Steinmetz. Let's take a quick look at housing. So if there was an area where the K shape that we've heard so much about is applicable, it's certainly in housing. For sale housing last year was actually up 3%. That is to say, home sales were up 3% despite the pandemic in all of California last year. And through January, home sales are up over 20%. Home prices have risen across the state and are presently in record high territory in the neighborhood of $700,000 for the state as a whole. And the median price in the month of January was up 22%. So we're definitely seeing that the housing market is off and running. That's a good sign. Here in Los Angeles County, the LA median is in the neighborhood of $700,000. The median price is up 13%, sales are up 15%. So we're headed into 2020 with the expectation that the economy and the housing market are going to do fairly well. Here in Long Beach, the median price was just under $700,000 and up 11% for the month of January. So it's also participating in this recovery. So that's a good sign. Of course, this activity is being fueled in part by very low interest rates, which for a period of time are actually below 3%. They've edged up above 3% in the recent weeks. Also, very lean demand has been contributing to the run-up of home prices. The supply of homes is typically around 4 months inventory. Right now it's about 2 months, and we expect that to continue as we go through the rest of this year. So that's going to keep the burner on the housing market as we go through this year. We expect to see a continued increase in home prices. So higher home prices, despite low interest rates, have translated into lower affordability. So for Los Angeles County, with a median of just under $700,000, the minimum qualifying income for a home loan is about $124,000, which is well above the household median for the county. Of course, this is nothing new to us, and so it's just a good idea for us to kind of take stock of where things stand. So even as we have seen that the housing market has done well, we know that it's an expensive place to live. But the rest of the housing market outlook has been mixed. Construction, as represented here by permits, was down last year, both statewide and locally. And while it's been a great opportunity for people who have the financial resources to become homeowners in the present market situation, as we all know, many households, both renters and homeowners, have faced difficult times. Loss of jobs, limited hours, making it difficult for them to make their monthly payment or cover their rent. And so thankfully, forbearance programs, rent and eviction moratoria have basically bought time for these households in order for us to get through these very difficult times. On the commercial real estate front, with everybody working at home, of course, office vacancy rates have headed north. Just in San Francisco, it's remarkable how the vacancy rate increased by a factor of 4. The flip side is that with all the purchases that we're making online and elsewhere, the industrial market here in Southern California is at rock bottom vacancy rates, just under 2%. So all in all, as we take a look at the year ahead, we are looking at strong growth in terms of GDP. We're looking at a slower recovery in the labor market, maybe 2022 or so, unless the Fed is entirely correct and we land much bigger job gains and bring that unemployment rate down sooner than expected. Certain sectors of the economy are going to lag in recovery while others will be ahead of the game. Bottom line is that the pandemic is going to dictate the pace of recovery. And here in California, for the time being, as we reopen a little bit more slowly than other parts of the country, it's going to take some time. But we fully expect that as we get into the second half of this year, we'll see an acceleration of growth here in California. Do keep in mind, California is a huge source of economic strength for the U.S. During the last economic expansion, while we accounted for just 12% of jobs, we accounted for over 16% of job gains. And so we expect as we go through 2021 that once again California is going to lead the way in recovering across the nation. Thank you.
Thank you for all that insight, Dr. Kleinhans. We've got some questions coming in from the audience, so let's dive right in. I think the first question we have is, with the vaccine rollout, how fast will the economy pick up? I don't know if he's hearing that.
Okay. Try again, please.
Sorry, okay.
Thanks.
No worries. First question, with the vaccine rollout, how fast will the economy pick up?
Well, so I think that's the ace in the hole that we have right now. Until we got a sense that indeed the vaccine was going to roll out at a faster pace, not just here locally, but across the country, it wasn't entirely clear just the extent to which we were going to be able to reopen and reopen safely. So as we heard yesterday, the Fed is quite hopeful that we're going to see the U.S. economy reopen, see economic growth accelerate, and see that the labor market will improve. So, you know, every single day we hear news that is relevant to determining what that trajectory is going to look like. And every single day in recent weeks, we've been able to have a little bit more optimism about where the economy is going to go than we did the day before.
Thank you. Second question, what is the Port of Long Beach doing to address bottleneck issues affecting the supply chain?
Well, I'm not the best person to address that question, but we know that it's a very challenging time. There's huge pent-up demand, as you heard me say earlier in my remarks, and the ports are bursting at the seams, trying to offload the material on the ships, and they're also trying to, you know, make sure that excuse me one second, I'm sorry.
No worries.
Anyway, so it'll be some time before they're able to clear the backlog, but as I said, I mean, I think we're going to continue to see the kinds of scenes that I put up on the screen earlier for quite some time, because what's happened is that people have been keeping their powder dry. They've been, you know, spending to a limited extent, but as the economy reopens, we expect them to increase their expenditures, not just on the goods that are coming in through the ports, but also on services as things improve.
Thank you. And then a final question, should be an interesting one. Are there new business opportunities for international trade as a result of COVID-19?
Well, I'm sure there are. You know, that's a good question. The fact of the matter is that just all across the globe, we've got countries that are reopening to varying degrees. It's important to keep in mind, too, that the new administration is taking a different stance with respect to tariffs. And so there are a couple of things that will be working in our favor in terms of increasing trade opportunities, not just in the coming months, but in the coming years. So if we reopen more, we re-engineer some of our stances with respect to other countries and trade policy, I think there'll be quite a few opportunities to take advantage of. And the VIP room that we will be going into a little bit later on might give us a chance to talk about that in greater detail. Thanks.
Awesome, and I think we still have some more coming in. So the next one that just popped up is, what is the status of new business permits?
Well, it's been interesting. So I don't have information on new business permits, but I track the number of establishments here in California, in Los Angeles County, and we have the ability through the Office of Economic Research to do the same here in the city of Long Beach. And the fact of the matter is, and we only have information, good or bad, we only have information through the second quarter of last year. So, you know, we don't have real-time data as to what's happening here in the first few months of 2021. But we at least were picking up the worst quarter during the pandemic shutdown, and business permits or business establishment counts were holding steady through the second quarter of last year. So we'll have to see how the pandemic has affected business permits as we go forward.
Got it. As we have some other questions coming in, I wanted to ask, what are you going to be looking for in the coming months? What are some signs that you'll be looking for?
Well, as I mentioned, the consumer sector is so important to our economic recovery. So I'm looking for things like increases in not just consumer durable goods, but, you know, the hardest hit sectors were the service sectors. So people going out to take vacations, whether they're road trips or hitting the Long Beach airport and traveling out of the area, but vacation spending, other kinds of discretionary spending that just didn't happen. Even going to restaurants, that's going to be a huge boost to the local economy, to local tax revenue sources for the city of Long Beach. So I'm going to be looking both near and far for evidence that people are opening up their wallets and they're increasing their expenditures. And as that happens, the other parts of the economy are going to tag along.
Got it. And this question's along those lines. When will the cruise ship and tourism industries rebound?
Well, that I would imagine is also going to be tied to our sense of comfort in returning to these kinds of activities. So, you know, I think the expectation ought to be that if we're largely going to be vaccinated in the next 2 to 3 months, and yet we're still going to need to exercise certain kinds of health protocols, social distancing, masking, and the like, you know, it's conceivable that things will really begin to pick up as we get further into the summertime. But I'm not an expert in that industry.
I appreciate the answer regardless. I think those are all the questions we have for now. Thank you again, Dr. Kleinhans, for your presentation.
Thanks.
And I understand you'll be joining like you said, the VIP sessions at noon today to go more in depth with the Port of Long Beach leaders like Dr. Noel Hasegaba.
Right.
So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Tickets to the VIP sessions are almost sold out, but still available for purchase if you go to the VIP rooms tab on Hubalo. Now you'll learn about the record-breaking year that Port of Long Beach had in 2020, despite so many challenges. Let's hear about a bright spot in our local economic picture.
I'm Mario Cordero, Executive Director of the Port of Long Beach. My thanks to the Cal State Long Beach Department of Economics and the Long Beach Economic Partnership for inviting me to participate in the Quarterly Economic Forum. Let's take a quick look back. Last March, the COVID-19 lockdown began. Who could have imagined that a year later, the pandemic would still be with us? The economic effects of the pandemic were immediate. At the Port of Long Beach, we saw canceled sailing after canceled sailing. Still, while our cargo container volumes fell 7% in the first half of 2020, that wasn't bad when compared to many other ports. With last spring's federal stimulus propping up our economy, consumer spending weakened, but a few sectors actually thrived. Many of us invested in home offices or home gyms, home entertainment systems. People remodeled their homes. Many of these products come from Asia on the Trans-Pacific trade route, and Long Beach is the premier gateway for trade along that crucial conduit for international trade. On the docks, we saw the impact of the increased consumer demand in the third and fourth quarter of 2020. Our trade volumes jumped up the second half of the year, climbing nearly 19%. Our terminal operators, dock workers, truck drivers, and other supply chain professionals have had a tumultuous year. For the marine terminals, volumes went sky high as they processed record amounts of cargo. Still, it was simply not possible to keep up with the influx of imports. Ships lined up off the coast, waiting for a chance to come to berth. Complicating the issue is that warehouse and distribution centers in Southern California are jammed to the rafters, and the workforce was slammed by the COVID virus. We quickly realized that the first step to catching up should be to vaccinate our frontline waterfront workers. Thankfully, this has begun. Trucking has already seen a shortage of personnel before the pandemic, so yes, the ranks of truck drivers and warehouse workers need shots as well. Through it all, 2020 turned out to be our best year ever at 8.1 million TEU container units, more than 6% higher than 2019. Only the Port of Los Angeles topped our total among U.S. ports. We will continue to invest in capital improvements to ensure that in the long term, we have the facilities we need to cope with the rising volumes of cargo. For Long Beach, that means $1.7 billion in construction over the next 10 years. So what do we foresee for the rest of 2021? While U.S. economists expect at least a modest economic growth, we remain cautious. We're optimistic long-term, but short-term, we see uncertainty in the consumer sector that drive us for so much imports. Certainly there's hope. COVID cases are declining and vaccinations are climbing. We are all hopeful that we can return to something near normal in the second half of 2021. Normal world trade is probably a ways off. COVID-19 is likely to continue disrupting the international trade for several more years until vaccinations cover the globe. Meanwhile, our strong capital improvement program will allow us to remain as the port of choice for an industry that requires speed to market, reliability, and cost effectiveness. Thank you, and stay safe.
Let's now hear more about the local economic outlook for our region with Dr. Seiji Steinmetz, Professor and Chair of Economics at Cal State Long Beach and Director of the university's Office of Economic Research. Dr. Steinmetz's research specialties include transportation, urban, and environmental economics. Among his scholarly achievements, including publications in leading economics and interdisciplinary journals, he is especially proud of his role in developing the annual Long Beach Latino Economic Report and this quarterly Economic Forum series. As a first-generation college student, Dr. Steinmetz was educated by the California Community Colleges and the California State University and University of California systems. He'll be answering your questions after his presentation too, so be sure to type them in the Q&A tab.
All right, thank you very much, Stephanie. Let's take a look at what's happening with Long Beach's economic recovery with a focus on employment. And we'll begin by looking at employment in Los Angeles County. Now, the reason we want to study the county first is because 82% of Long Beach's working residents are employed somewhere in LA County, including Long Beach. Now, since January of last year, employment in the county is down about 12.3%. So there are about 562,000 fewer jobs now than there were at the beginning of last year. Now, the graph you see on the left there, that's the path of the employment recovery in LA County. We saw a very large shutdown. We saw a very large job loss due to the shutdown and then a gradual recovery up to this point, but it's been fairly slow. Only about 23% of the jobs lost during the shutdown have actually been recovered. Now, a recurring theme you're going to see today and in this talk is that the recovery trajectory is very different for different industries and for different communities. For example, on the left there, we see a ranking of impacts on different industries, job losses on different industries in the county. Most notably, we've seen very large losses in the accommodation and food services industry, right? About 172,000 jobs fewer than last year in the county in hotels and restaurants and so forth. The information sector has been hit pretty hard. This is mainly in motion picture and sound recording. Personal care and other services, so these are our salons and our laundry services and our religious organizations even. And then of course, arts, entertainment, and recreation, our performing artists, people who work in theme parks and fitness centers. In just those four sectors, we've seen 316,000 fewer jobs since the beginning of the last year in the county. But of course, there are job losses across every industry. Now, what we're starting to see here is that it's the jobs that are face-to-face, right? The jobs that rely on face-to-face interaction are the ones that are getting hit the hardest, right? People in service occupations, and those four definitely fit that bill. In fact, over half of all of the job losses we've seen since the beginning of last year are in those four hardest hit sectors. And only 10% of the jobs in those four sectors have been recovered. That is the 10% we lost during the shutdown. So again, it's mainly face-to-face industries and service occupations that are struggling the most to recover. There have been some gains actually in employment. For example, couriers and messengers and grocery stores, food and beverage stores, and even warehouse clubs like Costco. What's happening here is the money we used to spend on restaurants has been diverted to spending on preparing food at home or having it delivered. Right? So the only job growth we've seen is at the expense of job losses in the face-to-face industries. We've also seen some growth in home improvement store jobs. That's because when we're stuck at home, we can finally get around to those projects that we've been putting off since 2005. And also, non-store retail sales are up as we've been diverting some of our purchases away from traditional retail storefronts to online retailers. Now, with this understanding that it's the face-to-face workers and the service occupation workers that are struggling the most to recover, keep in mind these are also lower income jobs, which helps us to understand the following. For the higher income bracket, for jobs earning more than $60,000 a year, the recession is essentially over. Employment is down only about 1% for the highest earning jobs. For middle income jobs, employment is down about 6.6%. But for the lowest income earners, for jobs paying less than $27,000 per year, employment is down 26.4% since the beginning of last year. In fact, if we look at this graph, the green and blue lines you see there, look at since June. Those are high and middle income jobs where we've seen a steady increase in employment in the county since June. But the red line, which is our low income earners, right, since June, that line's going in the wrong direction. In other words, we've seen a decline in jobs among those lower income earners. And these are the two upper and lower legs of the K when economists refer to a K-shaped recovery. So what can we learn about this, or how can we apply this to Long Beach's unemployment situation right now? Well, the best way to understand that is to look at very recent data on unemployment insurance claims filed by our Long Beach residents. Now, to give some background, about 250,000 claims have been filed by Long Beach residents since the beginning of last year. And that includes pandemic unemployment assistance claims that's extended to those who traditionally would not qualify for unemployment benefits, such as independent contractors and the self-employed. Now, claims rates, as you see on the graph on the left, since last year, claims rates have fallen, which is a good sign, but still they're much higher than normal. Right now, the rate at which unemployment claims are coming in from our city's residents is about 4 times higher than normal. And if we look at the most recent few months, since December, there's still been about 30,000 new claims filed. Right, we can also look here at which industries have been impacted the most to get a sense of which of our Long Beach members of our Long Beach workforce are struggling the most to recover. Not surprisingly, again, at the top we see accommodation and food services. Right, our hotel and restaurant jobs are seeing the largest share of recent claims, showing that they're still struggling the most to regain employment, with about 1/4 of all recent claims. Now, retail trade is another hard-hit sector or struggling sector in Long Beach. Now, what's interesting is retail trade is actually up about retail spending is about up 17% in the county, but retail jobs are still struggling in Long Beach. And what's happening is that there's some of the increased spending is difficult to capture for the traditional brick and mortar stores as we are struggling to reopen. The other industries you see in red these are industries where there's a larger share of recent claims compared to their share of the workforce. And again, we see these familiar, most struggling sectors. Now, I have so much data to show you and so little time. So let's just take a few takeaway points here. About 1/3 of all recent unemployment claims have been filed in just 2 sectors, accommodation and food services and retail trade. Over half of recent claims are from are from those with a high school education or less, despite representing only about 1/3 of the city's workforce. 19% of all recent claims are from those aged 16 to 24, even though they represent only about 11% of the city's workforce. And that's likely due to their heavy representation in service occupations. Now, 41% of recent claims are by our Latinx community workers, which is about proportional to that community's share of the workforce. And then 31% of recent claims are from Asian American and African American residents, despite representing less than 1/4 of the city's workforce. Now, we can take this demographic insights and these impacts on different industries, and it can help us to understand which neighborhoods in Long Beach are being hit the hardest or are struggling the most to recover. Now, the way we can do this is I'm showing you a map here that shows the concentration of unemployment claims, recent unemployment claims, by zip code. So I'm looking at the number of recent unemployment claims per household in each zip code, where larger circles represent greater concentrations of unemployment. And we can put that in context when we put it up against, for example, on the right on your screen there is a map showing the concentration of our residents that are employed in service occupations. So darker areas represent higher concentrations of service occupation workers. These are people who work in food preparation and building and grounds maintenance and personal care and other service occupations. And there's a fairly tight correspondence, right? This matches what we've been saying before about those working in face-to-face and service occupations are struggling the most right now. Looking at lower income areas, on the right you see a map showing areas where darker red means higher concentrations of families living in poverty, representing our lower income neighborhoods. And again, we see it's our lower income neighborhoods are also seeing a greater share of Long Beach's unemployment claims recently. Another dimension we can look at is ethnicity. In this map on the right, orange areas are predominantly Hispanic Latino, blue areas are predominantly white, and green areas are predominantly African American. And in this dimension, we see that the single ethnic or racial community that's struggling the most right now to recover in Long Beach is our Hispanic Latino community. And finally, to complicate matters further, there's a pretty tight correspondence between the concentration of unemployment claims in our neighborhoods and the incidence of COVID cases in our neighborhoods, which I'm sure is exacerbating or slowing the recovery of our hardest hit communities. So at this point, what can we say? How can we summarize where we are in the recovery in the city and what steps can we take to become more resilient to future downturns? Let's just first note again, Long Beach's economy is gradually improving, but some communities are struggling much more than others to recover, particularly those in low-income jobs and those with limited educational attainment. Also, workers in occupations that are service occupations or face-to-face industries, and then workers in historically disadvantaged communities. Now, I hope it's clear right now from this presentation that a critical part of our recovery strategy is to vaccinate our residents and vaccinate our workforce to get the workforce back to work and get our businesses reopened. Fortunately, the city's had a very aggressive campaign. We're very innovative in that we have our own Health and Human Services Department that could deploy vaccines very quickly. And that's accelerated our ability to safely reopen our face-to-face businesses and return jobs to our most impacted workers. And by the way, we can all pitch in. We can all help to improve Long Beach's economic recovery. First, we can continue to social distance. We can continue to wear masks until the vaccinations are fully deployed and until we've got the pandemic under control. But also, at least for now, let's focus our purchases on buying in Long Beach. Let's buy Long Beach, right? Shop at Long Beach small businesses as they safely reopen, and encourage your friends from other areas. Tell them how well we vaccinated our workforce and it's safer to shop here in Long Beach's small businesses. Invite them over. And for you fellow economics nerds out there, what I'm really saying is let's mitigate economic leakages right now and protect our gross regional product. All right, looking more broadly at our economic recovery, you just saw that the Port of Long Beach is setting records with its container volumes. That's very encouraging, right? That means more goods are coming to stock the shelves, more consumer spending is anticipated, more raw materials are coming into the region for production and manufacturing. So we anticipate improved output, improved spending. This is a very good sign, and we're just constrained right now by our ability to reopen businesses again in face-to-face industries. Now, we have to ask ourselves at this point, where would we be in this recovery were it not for all of the economic activity generated by the Port of Long Beach and its related sectors, our supply chain sector, right? That's been a very resilient part of our economy, which gives us some sense of what steps we might need to take to become more resilient to downturns in the future. And I'm gonna try and do this briefly using my mad clip art skills that's on your screen right now. Let's talk about the traded sector in Long Beach versus the local sector. All right, the traded sector, these are industries where we sell things to the rest of the world. We sell things to other regions. Right, examples of our traded sector operations are the port, the Long Beach airport, all of our wholesale trade and warehousing operations. Tourism, of course, is very important in Long Beach, manufacturing and so forth, and a recent revival in aerospace. And sales in those industries bring money into our local sector, where we have our personal care salons, retail stores, takeout restaurants, maintenance and repair services, right? So things we sell to the rest of the world generate income and disposable income and business and customers for our local sector. So to be clear, what distinguishes local trade from our local businesses or our local sector from our traded sector is that income generated by our traded sector generates more economic growth, right? It generates higher paying jobs and more local spending, thereby creating more customers and growth in our local sector. So as we start to talk about moving away from recovery, right? As we've accomplished recovery and we start thinking more about now future-proofing our economy and becoming more resilient, a few things to keep in mind would be continuing our investment, of course, in our key traded industries, right? Our goods movement, supply chain, and logistics industries, our tourism industry, and healthcare, for example. And then start thinking about attracting more traded industries, attracting more industries where we could sell from Long Beach and our region to the rest of the world. And the only way you can really do that is by investing in building a skilled workforce. So that would be the time to start stepping up investment in workforce development. And going along with that is you need to close the digital divide, because you can't have a skilled workforce if they don't have digital access. And ultimately, by doing so, you can improve opportunities for careers and higher paying jobs in our region and in our city. Now, don't get me wrong, our local sector is extremely important. We don't want to ignore our local sector. What I'm saying is in the long run, as we talk about resilience strategies, it's time to start expanding our traded sector, which will generate economic growth in our local sector as well. And with that, on behalf of Cal State Long Beach and the Long Beach Economic Partnership, thank you very much for listening. Go Long Beach and go Beach.
Thank you, Dr. Steinmetz. That was so illuminating and inspired some questions from our audience. Let's go to them. First question, how is recovery looking for small businesses right now?
So small businesses are suffering right now, to be honest. I mean, hopefully that's going to change as we start reopening, especially as we get the coronavirus under control. Like, for example, in Los Angeles County, total consumer spending is only down about 8% since last year. So there's been a strong recovery in consumer spending. But small business revenues in the county are down over 30%. Right? So it's suggesting that small businesses overall are having trouble capturing, and staying open for that matter, but having trouble capturing some of this growth in spending. This is especially pronounced in the leisure and hospitality industry, where small businesses in leisure and hospitality, their small business revenues are down about 65%. Or as we saw also before, retail trade is up considerably, but our local retail workers are struggling to recover because a lot of that increase in retail spending isn't hitting the small businesses right now. A lot of it is diverted to online purchases.
Hence why we should shop local, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Second question, how will reopening the economy affect the e-commerce?
Well, we've had a structural change. I mean, I wish I had a crystal ball and can tell you that. We can anticipate that some of the spending that has moved over into online spending. So for example, we saw increases in online retail spending. We saw, as I showed you earlier, we saw increases in sectors that offer substitutes for face-to-face services. We would expect some of that to go back, that as we reopen, I'm sure Dr. Kleinhans talked about pent-up demand. We're all dying to get back to the restaurants and bars, right, and maybe go on vacation and welcome vacationers from other parts of the world to Long Beach. And when that happens, some of the spending that we've diverted to these alternatives should come back. So on balance, I mean, I wouldn't expect overall e-commerce to stay at its sort of record levels now, but we've experienced a structural change in how we interact with each other, and you know, I don't know what the new equilibrium will be.
Fair point. Third question, what would you say to entrepreneurs looking to start a new business?
Well, that's a tough one. I would say, you know, if you're looking to start now, the first thing you want to advertise is that all your workers are fully vaccinated and that you take social distancing very seriously, because that's your way to capture, right? We're lucky in this region, or excuse me, we're lucky in Long Beach in the sense that we've had this ability to vaccinate, right? Deploy the vaccination faster and more effectively. I had mine, you know, my second shot was 2 weeks ago. And I don't know anybody else my age outside of the city who's gotten both their vaccine shots yet. So we should take advantage of the fact that we can tell the rest of the world, look, we're ahead of the curve in creating a safe environment to shop face-to-face. And I would tell these new entrepreneurs, sell that. Tell them it's safe to shop here.
And I will add that we've definitely reported ourselves on new businesses opening up throughout the pandemic, so it is happening and they are staying open.
Great, great.
Fourth question, is there any data regarding the potential positive impact of a burgeoning machine-to-machine economy?
I'm honestly, I'm not the expert to be able to tell you about that. I can tell you again that, you know, we've fundamentally changed how we operate businesses, and there's been some opportunities for innovation as we've been sheltering in place, and there's been some experimentation that we might not have done before in how we conduct business with each other. So I can't speak directly to that, but I suspect that, you know, there's going to be innovations and unexpected innovations across the board that we can't anticipate.
Thank you. Next question, what is the ratio of U.S. imports to exports at the Port of Long Beach and in the U.S. in general?
I can't recall the exact ratio, but we import a lot more than we export. In fact, one of the slides I showed you showed the inbound containers versus the outbound exporting containers, and it's pretty lopsided. What that means is we tend to buy more goods from the rest of the world than we sell to the rest of the world.
Got it. This is an interesting question. How can economically struggling areas in LA County participate in the recovery?
I'm sorry, one more time?
How can economically struggling areas in LA County participate in the recovery?
Well, again, I hate to sound like a broken record, but the best way to participate in this recovery, especially if you're a small business, is to focus on demonstrating that you are a safe place to shop. And the easiest way to do that is, if you can get your workers vaccinated, advertise it. Put a sign on the window that says, all our workers are vaccinated. It's safe to shop here.
Next question. Would it make sense to buy USA similar to buy Long Beach to help the economic recovery?
Yeah, so the answer is yes. And don't get me wrong, there are a lot of economists right now out there who are going to be mad at me for suggesting this kind of protectionist policy. But for now, at least, to stop the bleeding, I would argue that it makes a lot of sense to keep as much spending here locally, and you can apply the same concept to the US, at least temporarily, right, to avoid what economists call leakages, right, to keep the money circulating here. Now that's not sustainable over the long run, right? There are advantages to trading with other regions. Other regions can make things for more cheaply than we can. We can make things for more cheaply than they can, and we trade with each other. But I'm just talking about just to support our small businesses, for example, right? Keep all that local spending here. There's not a lot of gain for our local residents to be spending it elsewhere, right? Let's buy Long Beach right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Next question. How is LA County investing in the recovery?
I mean, there's just a broad number of measures that I'm not as familiar with LA County's current economic recovery plan, because they're not as, we're kind of spoiled in the city of Long Beach. Our city council just 2 days ago voted on an economic recovery action plan, and it makes it almost seem like that's normal, but it's not. Our city has responded very quickly. So there's a very visible and well delineated and articulated plan from the city. But I think it's still in development in the county. I'm not entirely sure what specific measures are being taken for long-run recovery.
Got it. Does a full recovery depend on a critical mass of vaccinations?
I mean, yes, I think it does. I can't stress, again, I hate to sound like I keep hitting the same talking point, but it doesn't stop being true when I do it. Our most struggling workers work in service occupations and in face-to-face industries. The only way to get them back into their jobs is to have safe face-to-face interaction. And the only way we can do that is to fully deploy the vaccination. And as you say, there's some critical mass we might hit, which some might call herd immunity, which will allow that to happen. And then I expect in our service sectors and across the board, we would see a fairly rapid recovery once that happens.
Next question. What is the forecast for commercial real estate and primarily office space?
That's a tough one. There are plenty more experts in Long Beach who can probably give you a much better forecast. I mean, I understand the concerns, I understand the question. It gets back to the way we fundamentally changed how we interact with each other. Some people are thinking we're going to go to the new normal will be a hybrid work week where we only go to the office 2 or 3 times a week. And some might suspect that would hurt the demand for office space. At the same time, where there's always a need for us to get together and interact with each other. I'm sure we've all who've been locked inside for a year are dying to get out and interact with each other and understand the value of that. So while it might make sense to think about a decline or at least a flatness in commercial real estate, I don't think it's going to be I wouldn't anticipate a very dire downturn in the demand for interacting with people at work.
And this is a great segue into the next question. Will remote work continue as we move forward toward recovery?
I mean, again, I wish I had a crystal ball. I know my remote work will. I think the way we've been forced to adopt new technologies and interact with each other, I think inevitably there will be more online interaction and less face-to-face. That has its benefits, right? It saves us time and money. It saves the environment a little bit with reduction in greenhouse gas emissions from our cars. But let's not underestimate the power and the value of human personal interaction. I don't think that's going away anytime soon.
Yeah, we are social animals.
Yes.
How is the construction industry doing in Long Beach?
So in construction employment, again, for Long Beach, would have to rely on the rates at which unemployment claims come in. So that's the most real-time information I have about the recovery. And construction claims are coming in, but they're much lower than in other industries, that is as a share of total claims. So the construction industry appears to be recovering fairly well. And I expect part of that is because construction activity can take place outdoors where it's a little safer to operate around each other.
Got it. And as we get the next question in, I wanted to ask, I appreciate that you were able to bring up the issues with our underserved communities that are being impacted the most. How confident are you in the Long Beach recovery plan that can really help close the gap in those disparities?
Well, I'm really encouraged to see that if you go back through the slides I showed you and you line it up next to the economic recovery plan for Long Beach, they're hitting a lot of the points I'm talking about, right? There's 13 million allocated, for example, for vaccinations and contact tracing, and a lot of that is targeting also service workers, right? There's money in there for our restaurants and bars and food service and accommodation, hotels, right, for supporting those businesses. There's money in there for fitness centers, for example, to help them reopen and recover. And part of that's not a coincidence. I mean, one thing I'm very pleased about at this city is our city's leadership. These are a data-informed, sophisticated group, and it's an honor at Cal State Long Beach to have the opportunity to regularly interact with our leaders and share the most recent economic information. So there's a pretty tight correspondence between the things the economists say need to happen and the things the city leaders put into their recovery plan.
Got it. Next question. What businesses will prosper fastest in the recovery?
So if we're going to measure fastest as who's going to see the largest percentage gains, it's going to be the ones who are hit the hardest right now, right? Because it's when you take a small number and you increase it by even a little bit, that's a large percentage increase. So I would expect, once we can safely reopen, I would see our food service, accommodation, and tourism industries to rapidly expand. But to accomplish that, it's not just getting the vaccine deployed, it's also messaging, right? It's also communicating with the rest of the world that we've got the coronavirus under control. And then to some extent, taking direction or getting clarity from legislation, right, from the state, for example, having protocols and guidelines for a safe reopening that are clearly established, right? The coordination between the actual vaccination and the messaging about when and how we can safely reopen. Once that's in place, then I would expect our service sector, our leisure and hospitality industries to grow very rapidly.
Awesome. How will the U.S. trade policy impact recovery?
It's hard for me to say. I don't know. Opening, the more interaction we have, like the more trade we have, the more that stimulates economic growth. But I can't point to anything in current trade policy that could, in the short run, really have a big impact in any particular. Well, I mean, obviously our exporting sectors are going to enjoy that. But we've had a lot of international trade already. It's not about really the level of economic activity right now. The level of economic activity is increasing fairly rapidly. It's the distribution of economic activity that's the biggest concern, right? So when we talk about, the Fed says that unemployment might be down to 4.5% or so by the end of next year, that's encouraging in the aggregate overall, but it's not very encouraging to those in lower income jobs and those who are more disadvantaged who are going to be struggling far behind that. I know I've taken a little bit of I've wandered a little bit there, but the point is that, import-export trade is fairly strong right now. It's just the dollars from that trade activity isn't hitting some of our more disadvantaged workers.
And along those lines, how will rising rental rates affect spending power of households in Long Beach?
Well, I mean, that's an ongoing issue. The majority of our Long Beach residents are renters.
Yep.
There's a substantial number who are what we would call, the technical term is severely cost burdened. I mean, what that means is they're spending more than 50% of their income on housing, and that's an issue. So one thing that we might be concerned about, for example, is as we start to come out of this, as we start to recover and come out of the pandemic, there's still a lot of money owed for right now in back rent. Fortunately, the city has put some safeguards in place to help tenants and therefore landlords. But it's always important to keep an eye, not just now, but on that community, especially the cost burden renters.
Absolutely. That was our last question, so thank you again, Dr. Steinmetz, for your presentation.
Thank you, Stephanie.
And then after today's event, Dr. Steinmetz will be in a VIP session with city leaders discussing our regional economic recovery. If you want to have face-to-face access to Dr. Steinmetz and Councilwoman Stacey Mungo, Go check out the VIP Rooms tab on this event platform to see if there are still tickets left. Now let's hear from some of our Long Beach City Council members and Mayor Robert Garcia about that economic recovery plan that was just finalized and passed by the council 2 days ago.
The American Rescue Act, of course, is a big federal bill that just passed the Congress that's going to help cities like Long Beach. And so we built our own Long Beach Recovery Act, over $207 million of federal money and county money to secure the city's future, get out tens of millions of dollars to small businesses and to workers, and to help really the health of the city. So COVID relief, testing, making sure that people are health, that community organizations are well funded.
What we've seen is that this pandemic has exposed deep inequities and divides within our own community. And the Inclusive Economic Recovery Plan makes specific investments into making sure that all communities, especially those hit hardest by our pandemic, have an opportunity to come back, catch up, and get back on their feet. We're talking about disadvantaged businesses, nonprofits, workers, and working families.
Our strategy on the Economic Development Committee was to listen, analyze, and then for us to take that information and respond to the community with resources. We hosted over 25 roundtables that were each more than an hour and a half long, where we asked questions of community members and they gave us their feedback on how to best utilize the funds available to leverage more investment in Long Beach.
COVID-19 has impacted businesses in a major way. There's been a lot of uncertainty, whether they open or they close. I know as a previous business owner myself, laying off employees and closing down your business is really tough. We have a huge opportunity with this recovery plan to really impact and help businesses and also get people back to work.
Crime has gone up across the country in the last year as more people are unemployed, schools are out, and services have been drained. And so there's a lot of issues that impact the city right now, but it's all going to recover. We're going to become safer, we're going to become healthier, and the economy's going to come roaring back.
Our Long Beach Recovery Plan is inclusive. It's centered on equity. It draws on recommendations from the Long Beach Racial Equity and Reconciliation Plan, as well as our Long Beach Economic Inclusion Everyone In Plan. And what it does is invest in strategies like business navigation, procurement, violence prevention, digital inclusion, food security, and health equity to ensure that communities have what they have comprehensively in order to recover.
We have to make sure that it's equitable. There are businesses that have been affected more than others. I know we talk a lot about restaurants, but there are some restaurants who are serving fast food that are doing better than ever. You look at barbershops or tattoo parlors or salons have been shut down this whole time, and it's really important that we get this money and help these businesses that need it the most. I'm also excited about the money that's being allocated towards our homeless needs. And I know this to be a fact that if families don't have childcare, it's going to be really hard for us to execute the rest of this recovery plan. So I was excited to see that we have allocated resources to childcare.
So many community members came forward with great ideas. I would say some that really have the most momentum right now are our empowerment zones. We're looking at 8 different areas across the city where a kickstart of investment will really get those areas to come alive with new opportunities and new jobs. Our vacancy plan, if you have a business that's next door to a vacant area, we want to partner with successful businesses and the arts to make sure that those areas are activated. We want people to shop Long Beach, work Long Beach, enjoy Long Beach, and stay and spend their money right here in Long Beach. If we do that, we can come back stronger than we've ever been.
The success of Long Beach's vaccination program is a national and state model. We're really excited about that, and we think the success of the recovery is going to be the same. Part of this recovery plan that we're putting forward is a massive investment in cleaning the city. So you're going to see enormous amount of kind of doubling down on clean team, on taking up trash, on making sure that the street sweeping is done. Get the city was really looking kind of pre-pandemic, right? And so that's a big part of our focus as well.
We know that the urgency and the need within our communities is tremendous. It's great, but we want to make sure that we do this right. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And put forward a plan that's comprehensive and works for everyone.
The economic recovery strategy is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to rebuild stronger.
We are looking at it at the Long Beach City Council level day in and day out. And as soon as the money comes from the feds, our plan is ready to go. We're ready to get that money back into the community.
By working together, remaining united and mission focused, we can ensure that Long Beach's best days are ahead.
Thank you, Council Members Allen and Mungo Flanagan, Vice Mayor Richardson, and Mayor Garcia. The Port of Long Beach is considered the port of the future and a world-class asset that leads in innovation, attracting investment from all over the world. Now we'll hear from business leaders who represent different parts of our trade and logistics ecosystem here in Long Beach, how they've innovated not just due to COVID, but also to make the Port of Long Beach the greenest port in America, and what the future has in store. Please welcome the panel moderator, Damon Austin, Managing Director of Capital Deployment for the West Region at Prologis. Damon is accountable for the overall investment strategy throughout California, Oregon, Washington, Colorado, Nevada, and Arizona, sourcing, shaping, and executing acquisition and development deals within the region.
Stephanie, thank you so much for that introduction. It's really my pleasure to be here today and helping to moderate this virtual panel. We have a really great group of panelists with us today that cover really all aspects of the movement of goods. So we have the warehouse industry represented, we have the port complex represented, we have rail, and we also have intermodal and trucking. So between us, we have really the whole industry and the movement of goods in a chokehold. So I'm going to just give a quick introduction of all of our panelists today, but I want to remind all of you at home that you can look up everybody's full bios on the Hubalo platform, and you can message all of us directly as well. So today we're joined by Sherry Hartel. Sherry is the VP of Intermodal Sales at Total Transportation Services, TTIC. Sherry's expertise spans drayage, intermodal, and trucking, where she's been a leader and innovator for the last 3 decades. Sherry has also been an instrumental partner with the port complex in LA and Long Beach, and she's also worked really closely with South Coast Air Quality Management District, where she was really pioneering working with them on the liquefied natural gas implementation of trucking fleets. Sherry's been a director of the Los Angeles Transportation Club since 1997, where she was also a past president. We're also joined today by Anthony Otto. Anthony is the president and CEO of the Long Beach Container Terminal. Anthony has been responsible for guiding the LBCT through the groundbreaking Middle Harbor redevelopment project. This is a $2 billion modernization of 2 terminals at the port complex, and that is really transforming them into the most environmentally sustainable terminals in the world, but also the most technologically advanced in all of North America. At full build-out in 2022, the LBCT will boast zero-emission platforms in nearly every aspect of its operations. And then last, but of course not least, we have Lupe Valdez, and she is the Senior Director of Public Affairs at the Union Pacific Railway. And she's been there for the last 15 years. And she covers in that capacity Southern California, Nevada, and Arizona. So Lupe has also spent decades in the transportation industry with Metrolink, with Metro, with SoCal Regional Transportation Authority, and prior to that, she served as the Deputy Executive Officer for the South Coast Air Quality Management District. Lupe currently serves on the board of many economic development organizations, including chair of the San Gabriel Valley Economic Partnership, as vice chair of the Inland Empire Economic Partnership, and a board of the Future Ports, board member of Future Ports. So thank you all for joining us today. I'm really excited to have a stimulating dialogue. Before we jump into the Q&A and to the conversation though, I did want to share a video that really highlights the innovation and sustainability efforts going on right now at the Long Beach Container Terminal. Can we roll that video, please?
Fast, efficient, and reliable. That is exactly how Long Beach Container Terminal is providing record-breaking productivity to major retailers worldwide.
But we have the best container port in the world here now. We can handle the largest of the largest.
Opened in 2016, this first-in-the-world, fully electrified terminal is providing unmatched speed and efficiency while being the greenest in the world.
This is the model to make sure that we maintain on the West Coast our dominance in the industry.
By separating our yard into 4 distinct automated operations: vessel handling, container stacking, truck delivery, and rail, we ensure optimal speed and precision.
Efficiency and dependability of marine terminal operations is the centerpiece of an efficient and dependable international supply chain. With Long Beach Container Terminal, their turn times, that is the amount of time it takes a truck to get in and out, that turn time has been significantly lower than most other terminals in the United States.
On the water side, our berths are fully equipped with shore power, where our ship-to-shore cranes, the largest in the United States, can lift 2 containers at once, delivering them to the first zero-emission, all-electric transport system. This fleet of all-electric, driverless AGVs then quickly and smoothly transports containers to the 70 all-electric rail-mounted stacking cranes. With the ability to mix and rearrange import, export, and empty containers all in one stack as needed, the opportunity for dual transactions is also vastly improved. In the control tower, our highly trained team continually ensures containers are being moved quickly and strategically to reduce yard moves. And with our automated gate system, truck turn dwell times are dramatically reduced.
The value to the trucking community is it's astronomical. Most truck turn times are averaging 90 minutes to 2 hours in LA, Long Beach, Oakland, and most of the West Coast, and even the East Coast. LBCT's time is about 35 minutes, so drastically less, almost a third less.
Semi-automated on-dock rail completes the terminal. Not only is it the largest on-dock facility in North America, but it is also the fastest and most efficient transfer station on the West Coast.
It'll have the capability of moving 3.5 billion TEUs and will be doing so with a very limited footprint compared to the previous model that we had there. So again, I'm very proud of this accomplishment on behalf of the Port of Long Beach.
Fast, efficient, and reliable. Getting your cargo to market is all that counts.
All right, that was really impressive. And, you know, Anthony, I'll actually start with you. You know, we're coming off a pretty wild year, right? We're just about to hit our 1-year anniversary. I don't think any of us could have predicted a year ago how just transformed our industry would be by the effects of COVID. And really what that's ultimately resulted in is a record-breaking year at the ports. We've never seen this kind of volume coming through. And I'd love just to hear your perspective, because that's the good news of what we've done. But on top of that, we now have so many cargo ships coming in that we've also got a backlog in the harbors as well. So I'd love to hear just your perspective on this surge of activity and what you're thinking about how we're going to be handling these kind of surges and this kind of volume on a prospective basis to handle this capacity.
Sure, that's a great question. So 2020, I guess for all of us, was a really crazy year for our industry, especially from doom and gloom predictions and canceled ships and low volumes that we experienced in the first half to an unprecedented cargo surge and record volumes that we've been dealing with over the last 8 months. It's been a wild ride. Previous presentations already covered the reasons why the surge. I'll focus more on why the supply chain got behind, where we are today, and what we need to do to improve for our future. You'll notice that I reference supply chain because it's the terminals. The terminals are really only one component of an efficient movement of cargo through this region. Trucking companies, railroads, warehouses, and distribution centers all play a vital role in the efficient movement of the supply chain. So, and the sheer volume of containers that the industry was attempting to digest was well beyond, I think, anyone's expectation. The entire supply chain slowed down for a multitude of reasons that I won't go into. But the fact was that containers that would normally move through the port complex in 2 or 3 days was taking more like 7 to 9 days on average. And that ripple effect was that freight backed up on the dock and created congestion, which artificially reduced our capacity. That congestion significantly diminished the ability to efficiently work cargo vessels, so vessels that would had normally arrived and gone straight to berth, in some cases had to wait at anchor. That's the reason for the long line of ships you see if you drive down Pacific Coast Highway. On top of all of that, we had our industry suffered from a reduction of our available workforce as we went through a couple of COVID-19 surges, which were not unique to the waterfront. I think all industries experienced that. But if we flash forward to today, things are catching up. That's the good news. We are catching up. Although volumes continue at a record pace, the number of vessels at anchor is roughly half of what it was at the peak in January. And this will continue to improve as we go through April and May until we hopefully get back to normalcy here in the port. That said, as we look forward to the second half, it's still projected to be just as busy. So to answer your original question, how do we intend to better manage the capacity? I'm happy to say that the Port of Long Beach, more specifically LBCT, will see significant capacity growth by year's end. We are in the final phase of the 12-year Middle Harbor redevelopment project, as you saw in that video, finishing this year, and it will be bringing a badly needed additional 1 million TEU worth of capacity to Southern California. That means more storage capacity, more cranes, another berth, more rail, just more of everything that we need to better serve the goods movement industry. And that's good news, I think, for everybody. Unfortunately, the capacity for other terminals in the ports of LA and Long Beach will remain relatively static, but these terminals instead will focus on the implementation of new technologies designed to improve efficiencies, increase velocity, and to hopefully better handle the continued growth of trade in 2022 and beyond.
Anthony, thank you for that. That's great. And congratulations again on the renovation project. It's really, really amazing. So I'm going to shift gears just a little bit. One of the things that we experience here in California is that we are definitely a leader when it comes to innovation, and that also includes the way we're looking at sustainability. And a lot of that innovation in sustainability comes ultimately through regulatory agencies. And what we're seeing right now is an awful lot coming through the Air Quality Management District and air quality new rules that are going to affect the transportation industry. So maybe Sherry, I'll start with you. How did these new regulations and air quality really impact operations and innovation in your industry?
Well, when the ports put together their clean truck program in 2008, it was a little bit ahead of the state requirements, but clean air is never easy, right? It's never easy to do. There's a lot of cost involved with that. But what we found in the trucking industry is that there were a lot of positive benefits that came from it as well, right? So spent a lot of time down in this port, and just driving down the 710, you see a big difference in what it looks like down here. The air quality is so much better, and yet we've grown and there's more cargo going through the port. So the new technology that we brought in, the liquid natural gas technology, is probably about the best because it's very clean burning energy and very easy for the trucks to get fueled and to run on a daily basis. The additional benefits that we saw to that was reliability in the trucks. We had newer trucks that didn't break down. So we had reliability for our customers and being able to deliver containers and not get trucks stuck on the road. And it also ended up in stability for the drivers, which is a big thing too, right? The drivers knew that they could go to work every day and their truck was going to be there and they wouldn't have to worry about downtime. So the stability in the driver community is huge because we need those drivers. We need more drivers. And the better you can make being a truck driver down here in the port a sustainable career, the more drivers you're going to attract. And that's one of the things that we're hoping to do. What we're doing now, most of the trucks down here in the port are already compliant with both the port and the state requirements. But we're continuing to move forward with testing technology on electric trucks. There's hydrogen fuel cell trucks that are being tested and implemented right now, which is very exciting because that's a great technology. But while the initial intent is to clean the air, there are a lot of other positive benefits that come along with it.
That's great, Sherry. Thanks for sharing that. I love hearing about all this innovation happening in our industry. Lupe, I'd be curious to hear your perspective as well, coming from UP and the rail side of the equation on this same topic.
Yes, and I think it's been really fascinating because the Port of Long Beach, along with the Port of LA, were true leaders in this industry with the Clean Air Action Plan. And I think key to everything in terms of any problem we have, any challenge we have, is partnerships. And I think both ports, really reached out to all stakeholders. And this includes community, this includes business, this includes everyone in our whole universe to make sure that we could focus on positive things that each one of us could bring to the table. It's not just one industry or another, it's all of us collectively working on these challenges and bringing to the table things that can be done. So I really believe that, and I'll echo the innovation. Innovation is also key to our partnerships and our working together on being able to reduce emissions for all of us in this Southern California region.
That's great, Lupe. Thank you. Lupe, maybe I'll stick with you. This has been, as I mentioned, a heck of a year with COVID-19, and I think it's really dramatically affected the way all of us do our business. I'm curious to hear your perspective at UP on what it means for procedures, for protocol, for safety, and how you're looking at the world in a post-COVID perspective.
Right. What a year it's been for all of us. And all of us have been touched by this, either in our personal lives or in our family lives, and every aspect of what we do and who we are. So it has been truly a learning year. I was very used to the word PPE. That was in my lexicon, but it had nothing to do with sanitizer, hand sanitizer, or gloves, or masks. It had to do with safety vests. It had to do with boots. It had to do with goggles. So we quickly had to kind of adapt. And I think what was very unique in this experience was we were learning things as we were adapting. So it wasn't a situation where it was, we understood all aspects of this disease, of this pandemic, of how it was affecting our employees. So I think what we have learned is how to be more nimble, how to be able to, we operate in 23 states. Every state had a little bit of a different approach, which is where your nimbleness comes in, let alone the state of California, which is huge, Southern California, huge. So I think what we learned, we set up networks. We also have nurses on our staff across the country. And I think we set up networks to make sure that they were fully involved in all the efforts. Obviously, right now, the push for ensuring that our employees all are standing in line to get vaccines. In California, just 2 days ago, I was able to register to get my vaccine. So, I mean, it's happening, and we're really doing everything we can to get our employees vaccinated so that we have defenses, so that we do see light at the end of the tunnel. We really, really do. But it has been a year of, I need to write a book on the year, but it really has been a year of learning, of stretching, of supporting families across our system to make sure that they have the tools they need to be able to succeed in this very unique environment. But it has been, we're coming out of it. There's positive things here, and we're going to come out of this and stronger and better, I will tell you.
That's great. Well, thank you, Lupe. So, I think I want to ask everybody really this next question, and that's really, coming off of the records that we saw last year in 2020, we're getting ready, as Lupe, as you just mentioned, to reopen the economies, and that means more movement of goods, more trade. So I think I'd love to hear from all of you on what we think these next 18 months looks like as we come out of COVID. What do we think that the opportunities are for growth? What do we see kind of moving forward? Maybe I'll actually start because, at Prologis, we're on the warehousing and distribution center side of the equation. And we believe, truthfully, that our industry has been forever changed and that we are on essentially a new flight path because the way people consume goods has changed so dramatically. So we think that there's going to be an incremental hundreds of millions of square feet of new demand for warehousing throughout the United States. We think more and more of our customers are going to want to carry more and more safety stock and inventory to make sure that they don't find themselves in problems like this again. So we actually see this as a rising tide that's going to create a surge in our whole industry. So maybe I'll start with you, Anthony. What do you see going forward, and how are you bracing for it?
Just as you said, the spending behavior and the whole change that we've gone through. Our industry went from a kind of a static growth of 3% to what looks like double digits, surprisingly. So this year is going to be extremely busy. Next year, and as evidenced by some of the carriers going out and buying new ships where they hadn't before, just to be able to cater to the demand. I think you're seeing that shift, and you're going to see trade through Southern California as a gateway just continue to increase at perhaps even a more robust pace than it has been over the last 10 years.
Thanks, Anthony. Sherry, how about you?
Couldn't agree more. With the rapid growth of e-commerce that's affected everybody's business, we're no longer that just-in-time shipping, right? Everybody wants their product in and waiting and ready because you have to have it to the customer's door the next day when they order it. So it's a very different dynamic. We're going to see the cargo volumes, I think, sustain. I don't think we're going to see any dip after this surge. I think it's going to maintain, and I think we're all going to be busy. But I do agree with Lupe in saying that we are a very collaborative industry, and we all work together to get through these evolutions.
That's great. Lupe, what do you think, and what do you see on the horizon?
I think it's going to be very busy. We are just absolutely thrilled about Middle Harbor, by the way, for the Port of Long Beach. That's going to be a game changer for us, at least in the rail industry, in terms of the opportunity that project will grant all of us. So I see us poised as being in a great position to be able to take on those additional challenges. Each one of us is looking at efficiencies, as we always have in our worlds, and we'll continue to do that. But I think in meeting the demand, that's where we're going to really come into a whole new light in terms of the future for the Port of Long Beach, but also for all of us that are part of the Port of Long Beach family, shall I say.
That's great. Thank you, Lupe. Well, I'd like to, I think, transition and maybe see if we can get some questions from our audience and that have come in. Let's see, are there any questions that are popping in? Okay, let's see. Okay, so one question that came in is, what kind of employee support programs have our companies implemented for our employees over the last year, coming through this, through a pretty challenging environment, but also a pretty busy environment? What are we doing for our teams, for our employees? Sherry, do you want to take that?
Oh, sure. So I will say the one thing from my company's perspective is they took safety number one through all these COVID factors. And a lot of our employees work from home. In the office, a lot of measurements were made for safety, keep people distanced, and a lot of protocols were put into place. We've also had to relay a lot of that to our drivers. Fortunately, our drivers are, they're pretty safe for the day, right? They're in their truck and they stay in their truck, and it's easy for them to be safe. But I feel like you just couldn't do too much at this point. And we had very good success throughout the year in very few incidences in our office.
That's great. Let's see. Here's another question. With all the improvements in the efficiency and the capacity here at the port complex, what is this doing in way of impacting employment, job opportunities in Long Beach? What are the skills that our people ought to be developing for the purposes of workforce development? Anthony, is that something you'd like to give some perspective on?
Sure. I think LBCT is a good example of something. We've made that transition as we went through this project of deploying more technology than most of the other terminals have. So our work.
Is he still talking? Okay, we'll keep moving on. Looks like we lost Anthony's audio, but we'll come back to him. So there was I want to make sure we keep it pretty positive, but there was a question about the ISR, the independent source rule that's coming through the South Coast Air Quality Management District. This is something that I think a lot of people have their eye on, and its potential to affect maybe capacity from a warehouse perspective, or and also from the ports and from transportation. Lupe, I know you've been following this pretty closely. What do you think about ISR?
I think one of the critical things for ISRs, and that's indirect source rules, which are being proposed for ports, for trucking industry, for railroads, rail yards in particular, in the South Coast Basin. I think the most important thing to do as leaders, period, in our businesses and our industries is ensure that we're at the table, ensure that people have a reality check about our business and our industry. I realize we're all working 24/7, but individuals, I think the most important thing is to be engaged. And this is where communication is key. And I think that is the most important thing, because a lot of people, they see a train, they see a truck, they don't always understand all the inner workings of how it all works. Yes, they see a warehouse, but again, there's a lot that goes behind the scenes that is not always very well known. So I think it's up to us to educate people and to inform people what our industries are and how they operate, to ensure that there are that we work cooperatively to clean the air. At the same time, we don't hurt the growth that we want to take place in all of our industries.
No, that's great. Thank you. Looks like another question just came in, and that's really about, again, back to the workforce piece of this equation. How are we going to be working to make sure that there are more folks that have opportunities to get into our industry, including people with low education levels, criminal records, or without that work experience and history? And the idea here on this question is that it seems like our industries are potentially great avenues for expansion here. And maybe I'll start a little bit here. You know, here at Prologis, we think that labor and availability of labor is really one of the key elements for what makes our customers succeed or not in their various warehouses. So they're always looking for labor solutions. So we've done some work where we're actually doing community workforce initiatives where we come in and we actually work with the communities, and we actually put these programs in front of young people. We put internships together, and we try to just make sure that there's an awareness of the jobs that happen in the logistics industry. And I know there's other similar examples outside of the warehousing side of the equation. I don't know if Anthony's back, but if Anthony's back, maybe we'll have him address some of this too. Okay, looks like we might not have Anthony back yet. So Sherry, what's your perspective here on the job opportunities and how we can get more out there?
Oh, I think there's plenty of job opportunity here. I know even just with my company, we've always got openings. It's fairly easy to train. Sometimes it's easier to train someone with no experience than someone that does have experience. On the driver side of things, we have a driver training program where we bring drivers in straight from the local Long Beach schools that have driver training programs. So there's a lot of opportunity out there. And I love that because that's how I started 30 years ago, right? I didn't even know what a container was, but I could type good and I got a data entry job, and look at where I am today. It's been a wonderful career. I encourage anyone to do it.
That's great. Lupe, maybe I'll ask you kind of the same question. How do you think about the employment opportunities in Long Beach and elsewhere in this industry? Looks like it might just be us, Sherry.
I guess.
So another question came in about the competition to the ports of LA and Long Beach, and how do we ensure that our regions remain dominant? And you know, I'll give a little bit of quick perspective here. You know, we've really got just the stars have aligned for us in Southern California. We have the unbelievable infrastructure and capacity in LA and Long Beach. We have a great rail capacity and availability. We have a freeway system that's second to none. And then we also have almost 2 billion square feet of warehousing distribution centers between Los Angeles, Orange County, and the Inland Empire. So you put all that together and think of all the actual consumption that stays here in Southern California, and it's really a perfect storm for why this is the center of the universe and the bullseye for the logistics industry. So what's the competition? You know, a lot of it is the fact that so much just has to come in through these West Coast ports. So I think that's going to continue to stay strong. But what we also do see is lots of cargo can go to the eastern seaboard as well and get trucked or railed into the middle of the country. So, you know, what do we do to stay as competitive as we can here? I mean, that's one of the things I think that California struggles with is, you know, we need to continue to really have a business-friendly approach to inviting industry, inviting innovation here, because I think that's the trick. Is it is just a little bit more expensive at times to do business here. It can be a little tricky to do business in California. So I think just from a legislative perspective, anything we can do to make it as business friendly as possible will ensure that we're dominant over the long run. Sherry, what's your perspective here?
Well, the first thing I'm going to say is, yeah, regulation is not great, but look at what we've done with the Clean Truck program. And those added benefits, I think, are greater here than they are in any other port, because a lot of the other ports haven't upscaled their truck fleets, so they're having those difficulties. We're still the major gateway from Asia, so we're the fastest going through here. And probably the biggest thing I see on my end is the partnerships, right? The partnerships among the port and the steamship line and the terminals and the shippers, and you get everybody together and you're talking, you're working together, and you can get through things a heck of a lot easier. And that's still better than trying to make contingency plans around the other side of the country.
Yep, I'm right with you. Well, I think we're pretty much done with our time here. I just want to thank everybody, Anthony, Lupe, Sherry, you guys were great. This was a really stimulating dialogue. And so I'm just really glad we were able to get together. And I look forward to seeing you all on the business side of the equation, but also you guys are all involved in the community in many other capacities as well. So I look forward to seeing all of you in the near future.
All right. Thank you, Damon.
All right. Bye-bye.
Great. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you to all of the panelists and speakers today. The Economic Partnership hopes that folks tuning in here in Long Beach learned information that can help you plan for a robust recovery, and to our guests who have joined us from all over the country, the Economic Partnership hopes you can see what a uniquely valuable set of assets Long Beach has to help you grow your business. If you're looking for more information about how and why to invest in Long Beach, please visit the Long Beach Economic Partnership's new website at lbep.org. Be sure to take advantage of the interactive networking aspects of Hubalo. And please fill out the event evaluation so the Economic Partnership can ensure their quarterly programming delivers exactly what you're looking for. The link to the evaluation is in the chat now and should take just 60 seconds to complete. And please save the date for the next Accelerate Long Beach series. On June 17th, you'll hear about the aerospace and satellite industry and have brand new data as the vaccine rollout continues and the economy continues to reopen. The Economic Partnership would again like to thank today's sponsors: the Port of Long Beach, the City of Long Beach Economic Development Department, Downtown Long Beach Associates, Shoreline Village, KPFF, and Cal State Long Beach's Department of Economic Research. If you have a VIP ticket for one of the breakout sessions, those will start at 12:05 p.m. Just navigate to the VIP Rooms tab in Hubalo and click on the session you are registered for. Thank you again for joining us today. The Economic Partnership hopes to see you at their next event on June 17th and see you here in Long Beach shopping at local stores and eating in restaurants very soon. Stay safe.